Busy night. Ready to go. Here we go. And good afternoon. Thanks for joining us here on this Friday. It is 3 o'clock, or just past 3 o'clock, I should say, on this Friday. And welcome to this next edition of Adventist Health Bakersfield Wellness Connection. We are talking this time, as we do normally, about different health topics and topics that contribute to wellness. Today, tummy troubles, for lack of better terms. Dr. Nirav Naik is joining us now, a bariatric and also reflux surgeon. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming in. So what we want to first do is tell you a little bit more about Dr. Naik, and I think we have some information put on the screen. You got 15 years of experience, 10,000 successful procedures. You've had the experience and knowledge to help get people not only back on track in terms of heartburn, not heart disease, but heartburn, and also with bariatric surgery, getting people back on track with their lives and making sure that they're maintaining a healthy weight and kind of really changing lives, evolving lives. It's really fantastic. So I really appreciate you coming to talk about it. The first thing we want to do is, of course, invite your questions. If you suffer from heartburn or you're taking heartburn medications, a whole host of different antacids, I guess, anti-reflux drugs, we'll talk more about that. If you're on those and you're wondering, hey, is surgery potentially something I need to think about next? We'll be talking about that and answering some of your questions as we go along. But first, Dr. Naik. So first, I think the first question is, what exactly is going on when you have heartburn? Because sometimes people confuse heartburn for heart attacks and heart attacks for heartburn. What's going on when you're actually experiencing heartburn?
Well, as a heartburn sufferer myself, I can tell you the very first time I had heartburn, I knew exactly what it was.
Okay.
It literally is a symptom where patients feel burning going behind their sternum, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling. And what that's caused by is by the acidic contents of the stomach refluxing back up the esophagus and causing that irritation to happen.
Gotcha. Okay. And is it only around, because I understand, like, is it positional, like when you lay down at night? Does it sometimes get worse only after meals? Does it depend?
It does. It does. Depends on various things. What the meal consisted of, your position. Obviously, gravity is holding it this way. It's a lot easier for it to slide up as opposed to when you're vertical.
Right.
And certainly, large meal, your stomach's fuller. There's more pressure on it. There's more pressure for it to want to go up. So all of these things, especially with our current ways of eating, yeah, it tends to make it worse.
Okay, so the first line of treatment is what? Do we start with, we don't go to surgery first, right?
No,
we start the gold standard to start other things. Is it diet modification?
It's diet modification.
Okay.
More often than not, though, the reasons for the reflux have to be addressed. And almost everyone who has a problem with heartburn has what's called a hiatal hernia, and that's something that you may or may not have heard of, but that's a condition where the diaphragm muscle, there's a little opening in it where the esophagus comes through to the stomach, and normally it's nice and snug, and there's a fair amount of esophagus still within the abdomen. And so what happens is that as time goes on, a hernia is a hole, basically is what it means. That stretches out, whether from obesity, which is, again, one of the big reasons people develop heartburn.
Okay.
Smoking cigarettes weakens the tissues, increases your risk of getting that. And, some genetic factors, for instance, my sister has a hiatal hernia, and she's had it since she was 13. So, just some people are just prone to getting it. As that stretches out, it allows the stomach to go up into the chest. When that happens, your lungs develop a negative pressure. It's a vacuum. Vacuums do what? They suck
things out.
Exactly.
Yep.
So they suck the stomach back in there. Now the little valve at the end of the esophagus cannot work properly, so you've got a straight shot for acid to go right up into your chest.
And it's burning your esophagus all the way up. The tube, the food tube is what we like to call it, right, with kids, right?
Right.
There's the breathing tube and the food tube.
That's right.
So first line of treatment then, if you can't modify your diet completely, because most people do, but if you're still suffering, is what? Antacids, the Tums?
Tums is usually the thing that people go to first, or some kind of calcium carbonate or Rolaids or some other metal salt that binds the calcium and that neutralizes it for all intents and purposes. And for people who have ongoing issues, and if they're continuing to take large amounts, that can actually cause problems with aluminum deposition, high calcium levels, that sort of thing. So it's not good to be taking that, and it can also cause rebound hyperacidity. The second line of treatment is actually something called a, oh my God, I'm blanking on that.
Proton.
Oh, the H2 blockers, which is basically like Tagamet, Pepcid, that sort of thing. They really revolutionized ulcer disease and heartburn symptoms when they were first developed in the late 70s. But then in the early 1990s, we developed what's called the proton pump inhibitors, which are, the first one was omeprazole, which is Prilosec, and then there's multiple iterations of that, and they are extremely powerful. They actually shut down the gastric ability to produce acid altogether.
Okay.
So it works really well at controlling the symptoms. Therein also lies the problem.
Well, because I was going to ask you about that. We're actually listening to some, or I'm saying reading the questions as they're coming along here. Adriana Ayala is saying, what do you recommend for over-the-counter, which you're kind of talking about some of the different medications. I guess, so you start first with the antacid and then you go on to the proton pump inhibitors and all these other medications?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And, usually not everything's going to work for everyone. For me, Tums works just fine. I just have to take 10 of them. That's the only problem.
You get a lot of calcium in that case, then.
Yeah, well, that's actually bad.
Okay.
Again, you can absorb all that calcium, and unfortunately, it can lead to kidney stones. It can lead to hypercalcemia, and so you got to kind of be careful of that. Everything in moderation, but more importantly, though, if that's not working, if you're finding yourself taking Tums 4 or 5 times a day, you probably ought to move to something else.
And because Brandon Harden, who's watching us here on the feed as well, said, "Is it bad for your kidneys after prolonged use?" You heard that? That's true. You were talking about
it's bad for calcium itself, probably not so much.
Okay.
But at the same time, the other medications all have their own set of problems associated with them. And this is just as an aside, when you look at a medication, we don't really know what it does to you. We're looking for one specific effect. When other things happen, they're called side effects, right? And what side effects are tolerable, what side effects are acceptable. What you find is after you've been using a medication for dozens and decades or whatever the case might be,
right,
all of a sudden these other side effects, these long-term effects start coming out. And we're starting to see that now with these H2 blockers and with the proton pump inhibitors, which is why it's one of the things that I actually I'm really looking negatively on those. But for people who have minor symptoms, it might be okay to take those medications on a kind of limited basis. When those medications were first developed, the indication from the FDA was to be on them for 6 weeks. I have patients that have been on them for 20 years.
Right?
And so now you tell me what that's doing to you. And the answer is we don't know. So now we're starting to find other associations with, possibly dementia, Alzheimer's. Realize when you shut down the acid production, you are actually not killing the bacteria that you eat, so you're changing your gut flora. You need your acid to break down your food.
It's there normally, naturally. It's what it's there for.
And the problem isn't you're making too much acid. The problem is it didn't stay where it belongs. That's the problem.
It's the anatomy. That's
so
the problem.
we're changing the symptom. We're fixing the symptom. We're not fixing the problem.
Gotcha. And another question we're getting from, I think it's Adriana Ayala. She said, "Do you prefer Nexium or Prilosec? Do you kind of have one preference?"
I don't have a preference. Whichever one tends to work best for you. The one I take is Dexilant. Unfortunately, a lot of the insurance companies won't cover it, so it gets to be kind of expensive, but it's really potent. I take it once every 3 days, just as necessary, if that's the case.
And Sharon Orozco is asking, I was on omeprazole, I think it is, for a year, and the side effects were strange. She said she'd rather live with GERD. So, but there's other options. There's other options, and we want to get to that, and we're going to talk about that right now. This is the LINX procedure. So, how long? I guess walk me through the different the process. Now, you've been on these medications for how long before you have to start considering maybe doing surgery? And doing
there's actually two things to consider. It's not just the symptoms of the heartburn, because not everybody has heartburn the same way. But the other symptom that really kind of goes not so much ignored, but reported, I suppose, is regurgitation.
Okay.
And what that is because that valve doesn't work well, the stomach is up higher where it belongs, not where it belongs. Things can now reflux directly up in there, not just acid, now food and other things can directly go up into your into your mouth, into your lungs, and now we're starting to see adult onset asthma for some reason. Well, you're actually refluxing acid directly into your lungs.
You're inhaling food, essentially, acid.
Basically.
Yeah.
So sometimes when people will lay down flat at night, all of a sudden they'll wake up with vomit in their throat, and they're like, oh my God, what just happened? They didn't vomit, it just came up on them. And that's actually quite dangerous.
Okay, because you could aspirate stuff in your lungs is not good. You get pneumonia, you get all kinds of other things.
Yes.
Okay, so the LINX procedure, we're going to talk about this. It's used for treating GERD. What is? I mean, the LINX, I'm assuming, comes because it's like almost putting a bracelet around the top of the stomach,
and
right?
what the LINX is, it's in conjunction with two things. One is the hiatal hernia repair. You have to fix the hernia. If you don't fix the basic malfunction at the region of the diaphragm, the LINX won't work as well.
Okay.
And so traditionally, the other modality of treatment was to actually create a new valve, because if you just closed the hiatus, it wasn't as well as if you reinforced that valve, because that valve, once you fix the hernia, still doesn't work as well. Once it's been damaged, it can't work.
Okay.
So the traditional surgery was to actually take the stomach and wrap it around the lower part of the esophagus to kind of squeeze it down to kind of prevent things from wanting to go up there.
Huh.
And it worked well.
Okay.
The problem is it worked a little too well sometimes. And now people had difficulty swallowing. You'd have to go back and loosen up, which is always difficult. But more importantly, though, if you ever had to vomit or if you had to burp, you couldn't do it because you're squeezing your stomach to get that out. Well,
And
you're also squeezing the top.
esophagus, which is in the middle of it, right?
So
Yeah.
basically you're squeezing that new valve. So you're squeezing this to get it out, but you're also squeezing here, so you're basically squeezing against a closed valve. So you can't vomit. So say you get food poisoning and you need to vomit or
motion
something.
sick or
anything.
whatever reason. That's another
Can't do
normal
it.
body reflex. You
Absolutely.
can't do.
So you're changing the anatomy for that. So to get around that, the company that makes this was able to develop these titanium beads that are linked together. And essentially what happens with that is it links around the lower part of the esophagus. And when it comes around there, it stays closed.
And that's what it looks like. That's the beads coming in
that's
right
the
now,
graphic of it, yeah. And so it comes around there and...
that's liquid sloshing out of the stomach there, and that just keeps it
closed.
tight.
Now the nice thing is they're magnetized, so what happens is they're set to open at a predetermined pressure, so that when you swallow, it opens to allow the food bolus to go through, slams right shut again. And also, if you end up having to burp or if you have to vomit, and that's a picture of the hiatal hernia right there.
Okay, we're going to show that
there.
and pick that up. Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. No, you're seeing what's coming up next.
Used
That's
So-
a hernia, which
right.
means you were saying it's basically going above that muscle that
Exactly.
divides your chest.
So what we're seeing right here is actually the hernia itself. I've pulled everything back down. We're opening back up to try to get everything back where it belongs. And you can see once everything is dissected out that there's a pretty sizable opening there. And once that happens, you close that hole and then you put the LINX underneath it.
Putting everything back down where it belongs in your stomach and not up in your chest.
Exactly.
Okay. And so how long does that procedure take to put the LINX in?
Between putting in if you've already had a hiatal hernia repair and you're still having symptoms, then the LINX can be put on separately, and that usually takes about 45 minutes to an hour. The hiatal hernia can be a little more complicated, and that can take up to an hour and a half to 2 hours to do also.
Question, which is probably in a lot of people's minds, is does it get covered by insurance?
It is.
There a huge copay with all this? How does that work?
That's also going to depend on your insurance plan, but yes, it is covered. It is FDA approved. It's actually been out for some time. It's been out for 5 years, but the company chose not to go out and do a mass market with this. They wanted to do it with select surgeons who have good success with these kinds of surgeries and have an interest in it and making sure that they're putting them in appropriately, not just willy-nilly doing this.
So you've been doing this now for how long then?
So we started the program about a year ago.
Okay.
And since that time, we've had really good success with it. All my patients are very happy. A couple of them still have a little bit of heartburn, but it is night and day compared to now. They'd have to take Tums every like 3 days as opposed to being on maximum dose therapy, and there's no more regurgitation. That's the thing they like about it the best, because really it's people find themselves sitting at 40 degrees, sitting in a recliner, because they know if they lay flat it's going to go up into their lungs when they sleep. So that's actually really dangerous.
So it's life-changing for those folks.
It really can be, yeah. People don't. It's like with so many other medical conditions, you don't realize how much you're living your life around that problem. Hemorrhoids, another condition that people
Very
just learn
common,
to live with.
that people
They
just
learn
live
to live
with.
with. But you can do something about it. They've just gotten nobody wants to talk about it. And so the thing is, you just learn to live with it. And once you don't realize how bad you felt until you didn't. And that's a very common thing.
People are like, why didn't I do this earlier? Why didn't I fix it earlier? Is this a permanent fix? That's the other question. Do you have to take it out at some point? Does it,
It's meant to stay in permanently.
Okay.
And the caveat to it always is this: it's a foreign body, and certainly there can be things that can affect that. For instance, it's magnetized, so if you're in a very powerful MRI machine or something, it'll unmagnetize the magnet. So we counsel patients on that.
Okay.
But again, there's really no reason to take it out unless there's a problem, and so far we haven't really seen that there's much to worry about from that.
Okay, and one of our viewers was asking, or Facebook viewers I should say, is asking, does it help you lose weight as well?
No.
Okay.
Not necessarily.
Which we're going to talk about in a second.
You can still get anything you want pretty much down with the LINX.
Okay, so it's not a weight loss device. It's
not
gonna reduce.
I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking this is more like a lap band, and that's probably where that came from. The lap band is placed in a different location, and it's adjustable so you can tighten up the stomach. This is actually meant to be around the esophagus, which does not really carry any food satiety sensation.
Okay.
So, won't work.
Really, really interesting stuff. We'll probably be able to come back to this again if people have additional questions here as we're going down the Facebook feed. Next thing we want to talk about is bariatric surgery. It is become a lot more common as time has gone on. One of the first things I think we should talk about is just the obesity epidemic that we have going on, right? I mean, it's not just about how you look; it's also how you feel and what it's doing to your health, carrying that extra weight on your body.
Absolutely, it is exactly that. It's an epidemic, and really, we've seen from the mid '80s till now, almost a 30-40 year span now, where basically our weights have just gone up almost exponentially, and it's really kind of interesting how that happened, but really, when you look at the late 80s, everybody's dropping dead of a heart attack. When you do an autopsy on them, you find these cholesterol plaques that are blocking your heart. So you're like, okay, cholesterol's bad. Cholesterol's associated with fat. So fat, cholesterol, if they're bad, they're killing you. So it turns out that wasn't the case at all.
Okay.
Most people are dropping dead of heart attacks because everybody smoked back then. So now the number of smokers has gone way down. And so what we're actually finding is that the data for these low-fat diets that we've been on for all these years turns out to be completely bogus. And it was actually funded by the sugar companies to blame fat and cholesterol for that, so that they could benefit from it. Because when you take fat out of your food, what does it taste like?
Doesn't taste so good.
Not very good, right?
So
they made it up with
sugar.
Exactly. So they basically, if you look at the carbohydrate content in our food today versus the carbohydrate content in our food 50 years ago, completely different. Same plate of looking food, but the composition is completely different.
Because I remember, it was big fat in the 80s and 90s, low fat. Everything was low fat, but we didn't realize that was the.
It's been thoroughly debunked. Okay. And the thing is, there's still now data showing that cooking with lard is probably just fine. When you eat high fat with high sugar, that's the death knell.
Okay.
That's when people really get into trouble. So really, what I espouse to most people is this: the weight loss epidemic is really a lifestyle issue, and more importantly, most people don't know that the things that they've been told up to this point are bad for them are actually bad for them.
Gotcha. So what is the death knell? Is it because you're getting a ton of calories both from the fats and sugars? Right. It's the combined effect?
It's the combined effect, and really what it is that your body is, let's put it this way, sugar is immediate use energy. And so if, the perfect example is a hummingbird, right? What hummingbirds eat? Sugar water. Yep. Right? Ever seen an obese hummingbird?
No.
No.
Because they use a ton of energy.
Exactly. So they're burning it off. Now, you and I cannot possibly expend that amount of energy. And so if that happens, if we were eating sugar water, then we would, of course, become obese. If your body has this sugar on board and it cannot utilize it, it automatically stores it as fat. The intermediate step there is actually cholesterol. So when you start increasing your sugar content, your cholesterol goes up, your fat goes up, and that's basically what happens. So when we're doing all these low-fat diets, we're making up with cholesterol, we're actually compounding the problem. So that's where the keto diet, paleo diet, Atkins, South Beach, all of those sorts of diets really espouse a lower carbohydrate diet, and that usually tends to work a little bit better. There's different ones. There's the DASH diet, the Mediterranean diet. All of these work well. They have one thing in common, and that is getting rid of the sugar.
Okay. And I was going to ask you about that because this is kind of key as we're talking about obesity and everything else. What is your thoughts on dieting? Because I am sure there's a ton of people out there who are watching right now who've tried dieting and it hasn't worked.
And so the real question is, what is dieting? And dieting, when you think about it as a act, it's very different from when you think about it as a lifestyle. And so when you think about it as an act, people who've gotten some excess weight on board, when they want to lose it right now, even though it took 20 years to get it on. We want to lose it right away, so we go on a crash diet, and that almost invariably fails when you lose, because your body goes into starvation mode. And then when you drop 25 pounds, you gain 30. You drop 20, 30 pounds again, you gain 40. It's called yo-yo dieting, and it's very common. All of my patients have done it. And so really what it comes down to is even patients who have had surgery for weight loss, right? When you look at patients who are morbidly obese, which is a body mass index of 40 or greater, or usually for most people it's 100 pounds overweight, there are conditions developed that diabetes, high blood pressure, so many other conditions that are associated with that at that weight. They really can't stick with a diet just because of the metabolic way that things are run. And so when you stick to a diet, success rate for morbidly obese people is about 5%. Okay, that doesn't mean surgery is going to be successful for the remainder. And there's still plenty of people out there that have had weight loss surgery in the past and still gain their weight back. That number is probably about 30%, which is still better than 5%. Right. That means a 70% improvement as opposed to 5%.
So, I mean, diets, can work if you're combining with other things.
Exactly.
Right?
So the way I look at diets is this: it's a lifestyle. I mean, if you do it for a little while and you go back to what you were doing before, you're probably going to go back to looking the way you were before, or feeling the way you were before also. But at the same time, I look at surgery as kind of the stopgap measure. You know, it breaks that yo-yo. So what I tell my patients during seminar and also in consultation is this: you're going to lose the weight yourself, not by dieting, but by eating right and being more active and exercising. The surgery is there to help you keep it off. And as long as you think about it that way, you'll always be successful.
Is it, I mean, I'm making an analogy, maybe it's not an analogous one, you can tell me if it's not, but when you talk about smoking cessation, that they give, you know, the folks the gum and all that, the Nicorette and everything, it's kind of, not a crutch, but it's something that's going to help you.
It's a bridge.
You have to do it on your own, right?
It's a bridge,
You still, at the end of it, it's going to be work on your own.
Absolutely. Nothing's going to make you want to stop. That's the point. You know, the thing is, you'll stop, but if you need some help doing so, that's it. So there's other drugs that are out there, Qsimia, phentermine, topiramate, there's various other things. They all have side effects. Remember I told you, you don't know what these drugs are really doing to you, right?
Right.
And so if you're using it for short term, that's one thing. But as far as long term, really it's about changing the things that have gotten you here. And that's it.
Okay, and I mean, we're talking an epidemic. I mean, morbid obesity, second leading cause of preventable death behind smoking. Less people smoking, more people becoming obese. Obesity is surpassing smoking.
It probably will in the next 10 to 15 years.
Right. I mean, that's pretty crazy. And let's talk about the other things: comorbidities, diabetes, hypertension, cardiac disease, sleep apnea. That's a big one. People die from sleep apnea.
They really do, and this is probably one of the most underreported or underrecognized problems that we see. And just as a personal mission, I've started screening my patients for sleep apnea, even patients who are not coming in for weight loss surgery. You'd be surprised how many people have this. The screening questions, I mean, it's crazy. And so the thing is that when you stop breathing in the middle of the night, your oxygen levels go down, your carbon dioxide levels go up, and essentially that oxygen levels going down really, really becomes a problem. I saw a study a couple months ago actually looking at the arrhythmia rates, which are basically your heart just not functioning or beating properly. They go up dramatically in patients who have sleep apnea.
Wow.
This is while you're sleeping. So essentially, if you have a bad enough arrhythmia, basically the heart starts fibrillating, stops functioning, and basically, oh, he died in their sleep. Well, that's probably what happened.
And can weight loss and weight loss surgery help with this?
It really can. You know, part of the reason that people develop sleep apnea as part of obesity, if you think about it this way, when I'm standing up, my belly weight is brought down by gravity. However, when I'm laying flat, all that belly weight goes up into my chest. So as I exhale, it takes up that room. Now my lungs have to push against that, and if it's a really big belly, a lot of weight, just can't do it. Till eventually the carbon dioxide builds up. It triggers a brainstem reflex that makes you do this kind of this loud snoring kind of breath. And what happens is you actually woke yourself up. And so a lot of times patients with sleep apnea, it's not just about, you know, you're not breathing at night. You're literally waking yourself up 10, 20, 50, 100 times a night. So you wake up the next day, it's like, you know, I'm so tired. I've slept 8 hours, but I just don't feel refreshed. I feel like I need to take a nap. It's because you didn't really sleep. And it's impossible to get restful, regenerative sleep when you're waking up that many times. You'll never get into REM sleep when that happens.
Wow. All right. So let's talk about obesity, genetics.
Right.
How big of a role does genetics play, and can it be overcome?
Well, genetics is kind of an interesting thing. We're almost programmed to want to be obese, and that comes back from when we were hunter-gatherers, and the people who had the genes that allowed them to store fat more easily were more likely to survive a famine. So that selects out the people who can get fat, right? So as time has gone on and our technology has improved and our standard of living has improved, we don't have to worry about a famine anymore, right? So now we are more prone to developing, to gaining those extra calories. But remember, it's a genetic predisposition. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. The only way you're going to gain weight is by eating those calories and not burning them off.
And our bodies, right, I mean, you were talking about that, are designed to hold on to those calories, right? That's the last thing that goes is the fat.
Absolutely.
Your body wants to keep the fat because...
In a situation where you're starving, yes, the fat is the last thing because that's its last energy source. So in the meantime, it does bad things. That's why starvation diets are so bad. Right? It burns muscle, all the proteins that you need. It can't function normally because it's trying to hold on to the fat. So with these low carbohydrate diets, what it does is actually tricks your body into thinking it's in a state of ketosis. Well, what that does, it starts using ketones for energy, and not only that, it trains it to burn the fat preferentially versus the good stuff.
So that's putting you in a better situation than being in a starvation diet. Genetic causes, hormonal changes, pregnancy, thyroid issues.
All of those things, they can affect it in so many different ways. Your metabolism changes when you're pregnant. Your thyroid conditions will again decrease your baseline ability to metabolize the calories that you eat. Drugs, other medications that you're on, all these things can really affect that.
What you're talking about, SSRIs, which is a depressant, the antidepressants, right?
Correct.
The lithium, the insulin, all those things, because you were talking about side effects. When we were talking about drugs that are treating one thing, they give you something else that you didn't.
Absolutely, and they do trigger some of the hormonal, or not so much hormonal, but well, they are hormonal, but some of the brain functions that control our hunger, control all these other things. So when it starts tweaking those things, you tend to get hungrier more often. But again, just because you're hungry doesn't mean you're going to gain weight. It still means that essentially you're more prone to doing it. If you're eating the bad stuff, you're going to gain weight more likely.
And we're going to get kind of nerdy and nerd out here. We're going to talk about aging, the telomeres, which are the tips of your chromosomes.
Correct.
The theory, at least back to my college days, right, is those things protect the degeneration of the DNA, the good stuff, and the chromosomes actually code for stuff. Those telomeres get shorter with age, right, as the chromosome replicates.
Absolutely. And so the thing is that as those telomeres shorten, as we get older, and there's going to be some pretty interesting stuff coming out there about how to stop those telomeres from shortening. It's actually coming up. I'm pretty excited. This is a great time to be in medicine. Some really neat stuff happening. But anyway, the point is that as that happens, you do tend to develop more fat deposition. You do tend to store fat a little more easily.
The older you get. So it's not just in your mind. The older you get, the easier it is to put on the weight.
That is true. Now, that's an association. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's a causal thing. Now, as we get older, we also are less active. There's a lot of other reasons why we do that.
Environmental causes, eating out a lot, snacking. I mean, it's harder if you're not cooking the whole meal. You don't know what's in it and how many calories are in it and how much oil is in it and everything else.
Yeah, we really have no idea sometimes what's in our food. And just because somebody told us it was good, okay, like lean cuisine, perfect example. If you eat lean cuisine, you're going to get lean, right? It says so right there.
It says it on the box.
Yeah, of course. And other things also like
salt, right?
Well, no, actually, salt's probably not as bad as people think it is.
Okay.
And if you're hypertensive, you probably shouldn't eat salt. It's going to make your blood pressure go up. If you don't have any hypertension, probably just pee it out. It's okay.
So what happened then? You're saying we're set up to fail. As time kind of went on, we were hunter-gatherers. We ate kind of what we killed. I mean, that was what we did back then. But then suddenly we had an abundance of food, and we decided we were going to eat everything.
Technology happened. Technology is killing us. So, I mean, even when, think about it this way. My dad tells me the story about how he walked to school 5 miles in each direction when he was uphill in the snow in tropical India. Right. I don't think so. But anyway, the point is that, and he really actually did see where his school was.
It was far.
They lived on a farm. They didn't have a car. But the point is that think about what we do now. Then the biggest thing that happened, they bought a bicycle. So now all of a sudden it made it more mobile. So now it expanded your universe. You can get access to other food sources, other work, more sources of income, whatever it might be. Then you got a car. Now you can literally get to anywhere in the country.
And you can sit while you're doing it.
Absolutely. You don't have to burn a calorie while you're doing that. And then now we have planes. If you're rich enough, you can buy your own plane. You can fly anywhere in the country. You can go anywhere in the world. Again, without doing anything.
Without doing anything. And I heard somebody else say, sitting is the new smoking, which is kind of a funny term, but it is.
And,
right?
Really think about it. 10,000 years ago, how did we work? It wasn't called work back then. It was called survival. And if you didn't go and chase your food down, climb up a tree, dig it out of the ground, you didn't eat. And so we didn't have that problem today, right? And so our technology has made it so we don't have to lift a finger. The calories come too fast, too easy, and too rich.
Too rich. Too many things going on. And the plate sizes, we were just looking at that too.
Yeah.
I mean, the supersize me generation, right? You were talking back to the 80s and the 90s.
Absolutely.
It was like a race to have who had the bigger Coke, the bigger...
More is better, right?
Yeah.
That's right. So essentially that's it. You want more value for your buck. And why have a little Coke when you can have a big one? You look at the Coke size, the bottle of Coke, look at it in the 50s. It was about a 6-ounce bottle.
It's tiny.
Yeah. And so now when you go to the store, it's like a 20-ounce bottle. Right? So
the liter. You might as well just pick up the liter one.
I ask people, I'm like, how many calories, how many teaspoons of sugar in a can of Coke? Well, it's 12. Well, nobody drinks a can anymore. Now we drink these 20. So basically, add another 40% to that. So
it's wild. It is a lot. So what to do? You were talking a little bit a while ago when we were talking about heartburn, about the fat blockers, the stimulants, the phentermines. What are your thoughts on those? Because there's probably some people out there who are using those.
And it's very common. I get asked all the time, well, can you just give me some phentermine? And I said, well, it's probably not a good idea. One, you're just whipping your heart. It's an amphetamine-based medication. And essentially, you're not really changing the root cause. You're basically just suppressing your appetite. But when you do eat, what are you eating? If you're still eating bad food, well, guess what? You're probably not changing anything. So really what it comes down to is you have to do like a root cause analysis of why we're heavy. And more often than not, it's because we choose poorly when it comes time to buy food. People tell me all the time, oh, well, you know, I cheated last night, I had ice cream. I said, we didn't cheat when you ate it, you cheated when you bought it, right?
Because you put it in front of yourself.
Right.
You did it yourself.
If it's in front of you, you're going to eat it, right? And so speaking from personal experience, I was a lot heavier back when I first came to Bakersfield, and you know, here's a weight loss surgeon, you know, being heavy, that's really, really good, right?
Not good for business.
So you know, I went on Atkins, and I was on it for 2 months, and I lost no pounds. And I was like,
what's going on?
Yeah, I'm like, that Dr. Atkins. So anyway, the point is I reread the book, you know, and I always encourage you, read the book. Don't just go to the website and eat this, not that. No, just read the book, understand why it works, and you'll understand, more likely than not, you'll follow it, though it took me 2 times, go figure. So anyway, the thing is that when you go and read it again and you understand what you're doing, I was cheating. There's a reason why it didn't work.
Okay.
And so instead of having a big bowl of Crunch Berries before I went to bed, I had a little bowl of Crunch Berries or whatever. Instead of having 10 Oreos, I had 2, whatever. But the point is I was still doing the things it said not to do. So I basically cleaned out my entire fridge and my cupboards and everything else and restocked it with things that were friendly to diet. And I started going to the gym more than once a month. Okay. And it took about 9 months, but I got about 45 pounds off. It was pretty impressive.
That is pretty impressive, big change. So let's talk about surgery, right? So if you've gone through all these other ideas and thought processes and dieting, when does a person start thinking, okay, maybe I'm a candidate or I should start thinking about a surgical option? So
the candidacy for surgery goes to a couple things. One is the National Institutes of Health sat down and said, okay, who is going to be a candidate for a weight loss operation? And so they set up certain criteria, and those are well established. I think they should probably be lowered a bit, but unfortunately that's where they are right now. And those criteria basically say a BMI of a body mass index, which is one of the calculations we use to help compare people with different heights and weights.
And your weight.
Right. It's height divided by, or weight divided by height meter squared. Right. And so basically when that number is generated, it generates another number, which is the BMI. Obese is considered over 30. Normal weight is considered 25. Severe obesity is 35 or greater. Morbid obesity is 40 or greater, and everything over 50 is considered super morbid obese. Okay. And all of those, as you go to each one, your mortality risks go up with each one. Okay. Right? So you have to be 35 or greater with significant other problems like diabetes, high blood pressure, sleep apnea, or anybody over 40 automatically qualifies. Okay. Right. And as far as like the decision to have surgery, really that's a very personal one. And I think it's an underutilized one in many ways because I can't tell you how many people have been on the diet roller coaster and, you know, for various reasons they feel like I could do this, I just need a little help. And that's really what it's designed to do. It's not going to do it for you. Okay. It will help you when you're ready to make a committed lifestyle change, and that's really what it is. And there's various different ways we do that with surgery, and they work differently too. Okay. And so walk me through this as we're doing, as you're kind of making this thought process. There's it's not like they do surgery on you overnight, right? There's a step process that you have to go through, right? So from the moment you're contemplating, walk me through that whole kind of. Well, usually. You'll have a consultation, and I'll go over those things with you. I have a seminar that I give, and we give at the hospital once a month. And it's an informational seminar. It's not it's not meant to be anything else. It's really just understand what the problem is and how we can help you. And so once you have that basic understanding, the consultation happens, and then you can ask specific questions of which way you're thinking about going, and we determine whether you're a good candidate for it or not. Right. And once we determine you're a good candidate, your insurance company or whatever payer you have is going to have certain criteria that they're going to need you to fulfill before they'll allow you to have the surgery. And those are meant for your protection. If you've never done it with medical therapy, with a diet and exercise program, well, by golly, do it that way first. So most all the insurances will require you to go through a 6-month period. It's not to say, okay, fine, I failed it, I couldn't lose any weight. It's to say, okay, to train you to say, look, let's start making these changes now because that's what you're going to need to do after surgery. To be successful. And it's kind of a test, if you will, to see if you're going to be successful. Yeah, and if you're having trouble doing it now, then that's a big red flag. Well, why are you having trouble now? What's going to happen after? Now, mind you, it's easier to follow those guidelines after surgery, but again, it's very easy to not do anything you're supposed to and not have a good result either. Right, so you got to stick to it after the plan. Absolutely. After it. So let's talk about the weight loss results, and there's different types of procedures. Maybe we should back up and start talking about that first. What are the different types? Because everyone thinks, bariatric surgery, and there's only one type of weight loss surgery. Right, there's basically two kinds of operations that we can do. One is a restrictive operation, and that decreases the size of your stomach or your stomach's ability to hold food. An example of that is the lap band, and the other one that's the popular one now is the sleeve gastrectomy, which reduces the size of your stomach. Other operations are malabsorptive operations, where basically what they do is they shorten the intestinal tract, so as you eat the food, it doesn't absorb. There's less intestine to absorb the food. Less intestine just goes right through, and so that's great for losing weight, but It's not very healthy for you.
Well, and I was trying to think that just on the other end, if you're not absorbing the food, there's probably issues.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues with it. You know, you're also not absorbing your calories, but you're also not absorbing a lot of the things that you need. So vitamin and mineral deficiencies end up being really, really severe with some of these. And there's a couple operations that that are performed that flat out I just won't do because I think there's better, safer options for you. So a combination of restriction and malabsorption is the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, which is the operation we've been doing for about 60 years now almost. Okay. And really what that operation does is it creates a small pouch, and then we bypass only a small portion of the intestine, not a large chunk, so it still works both ways.
Got you. And the results, and we were going to show that, lap band 35 to 50%, sleeve gastrectomy 50 to 75%.
This is excess body
60.
weight loss.
Okay.
Right. So in general, say you're 100 pounds overweight. For those patients looking at 2 years out, you're looking, and these are you know, kind of standardized published numbers. About 50% is what you can expect with a with the lap band, and anywhere between 60 to 75 for a gastric sleeve, and upwards of 85% with a gastric bypass. And again, those are average numbers, and it's a range.
It varies for everybody.
Absolutely. Right. You realize none of these operations are designed to get you to your ideal body weight. That's not what they're for. And just a little point of fact, the ideal body weight is not what you're supposed to weigh. It's not what it means. The ideal body weight is a statistical number that says at this weight for your height, you will live the longest. Okay. That's actually what it means. When your weight varies from one side or another from that number, your life expectancy goes down, your mortality goes up. So you want to stay as close to that number as possible.
How do you find that number? Is that the BMI?
No, that's no. If you look at mortality risk charts, you can actually find that number pretty easily. So the number that's the low point on that graph, that's your BMI. That's your ideal body weight. And I actually have a chart that actually tells you what it is. So
we'll
I'm 5'9".
And post it on here because it'll be interesting to people to know that, right?
Oh, and really, so for instance, I'm 5'9", right, and my ideal body weight is 157. You're like, whoa, that's way too skinny.
Yeah.
Well, think about it this way. We were meant to be really, really thin. You know, think about it this way. If you were 10,000 years ago, you're the guy in a loincloth running around trying to chase down, an antelope.
Or something, yeah.
Who's going to chase that antelope down better? The one who's at 157 or the guy who's at 175, right? Who's going to be able to climb up the tree to get that last piece of fruit more effectively? The thinner person or the heavier person?
Genetically, that's where we should be.
Who gets to run away from the saber-toothed cat faster? Is it the 150? I'm just saying. Right. So I mean, from that standpoint, we're kind of built to be thin, and the only reason that has changed is because our technology's made our lives so easy and food so available. We don't need to worry about those things. And if you look at patients, tell me a lot of times, oh, well, being heavy just runs in my family. And I say, well, you know, if you look at pictures of your great-great-grandparents, I guarantee you they weren't heavy. And they're like, well, they weren't. I'm like, okay, so you're telling me your genetics changed in 3 generations. It's not how it works. Our lifestyles changed.
Okay, and we showed this a few seconds ago, but we talked about it as well. GERD, these are comorbidities, the things that you have along with your obesity.
Correct.
It resolves. A lot of these things resolve when
they
you're
really
done
do.
with it. Sleep apnea, GERD, hyperlipidemia, which is high cholesterol, hypertension, high blood pressure, diabetes. I mean,
and that's the thing is you're not just seeing improvements, you're seeing resolution completely. Where basically, you know, especially after a gastric bypass, a lot of times patients are not diabetic by the time they leave the hospital, right? Done. It's gone.
Wow.
Because it's a very effective operation for that. And, you know, really that's probably the one thing about it that I think is really missed in this whole conversation. It's not about trying to get on a magazine. It's not trying about, you know, looking, you know, a certain way. It's about getting healthy, being there for your kids, your grandkids, the family that depends on you to be who you are. And the thing is, all these other conditions that develop as a part of being obesity end up they take your life, you know, and that's it. Morbidly obese people will die 10 to 15 years sooner than their normal weighted counterparts, and those last years are horrible years potentially.
Right.
So essentially, when you look at surgery, if you can, for instance, if you look at any other kind of terrible disease, look at AIDS, look at certain kinds of degenerative conditions, Alzheimer's or whatever, say, how about if I just did a little operation on you, not a little operation, but if I did an operation on you and I can cure you of it?
Most people
don't you think people would take it?
Sign up for that.
Right. So why are we not doing this? This is not to say surgery does not have risks. And that's probably what I spend most of my time during my consultation is trying to scare you, you know, because you absolutely should know what you're getting into. This is not a walk in the park. This is not like clipping your toenails. This is a major operation. But what you're doing is you're taking all those risks of a guaranteed 10 to 15 years of your life off. You're shrinking that risk down to less than 1% chance of a mortality or something like that happening, and compressing that risk and taking it all up front to get that 10 to 15 years later. It's an investment in your time and health is really the way to look at it.
And talk to me about the surgery. It is done laparoscopically, so
Yes.
3 little cuts?
And pretty much nobody does them open anymore. All of these are done laparoscopically and now robotically also. I did my first robotic gastric bypass at San Joaquin, or Adventist Bakersfield, a couple weeks ago. I just saw him in the office yesterday. He's doing great. He's
Using the robot, which is kind of cool. It's a big kind of machine that,
Yeah.
you know, you're not actually putting your hands inside. It's all done by a
The robot is a lot steadier than a human hand. I'm seeing this in 3D. It's telescopic vision. It's literally like having your hands inside the belly, which we cannot do laparoscopically.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Really, really interesting. And so you have those 3 cuts, and basically, what are you doing when you're doing the different procedures? You're removing part of the stomach, making it smaller?
So the lap band, all we're doing is we're really adding a silicone band with balloons on the inside around the stomach, and what that does is it compresses the stomach in a to the desired effect. And we can adjust it or unadjust it depending on what the situation calls for. So basically, it slows down the traffic to the rest of the stomach. Your digestion is normal. Everything else goes exactly the way it's supposed to be, right? You know, it's not as effective, but you know, again, we need to learn how to work with the band more than anything else. And I think that we're finding that where there's a little more effective options out there. And the one that's really been most popular now is the gastric sleeve. And so what that's actually doing is it's a reductive gastrectomy. We're taking away 50 to 80% of the outside, the stretchy part of the stomach, and that also is part of the stomach that produces a hormone called ghrelin that makes you hungry.
Oh.
So you're less hungry. You've decreased the size of the stomach to roughly the size of a large banana. So anywhere between 4 to 8 ounces is about what you're going to hold in your stomach. And it also, interestingly, we didn't know this when we first started doing this operation, but we found this effect later, is that it actually increases the emptying of your stomach. And so that almost works like a gastric bypass in some ways, and in fact leads to a metabolic improvement in how your body metabolizes sugar and that sort of thing. So it actually is much more effective than, say, a lap band, which also is reducing your stomach size in theory. Than that is for affecting diabetes and all the other things. So it's just basically a more powerful operation.
Wow.
And it's simpler too. You'd think, okay, if your stomach's big, I'm just going to make it smaller. That's it. So it kind of can jive with people in that way. But it's permanent. It ain't coming back. And the other one is the gastric bypass, where basically we're making a small pouch roughly the size of a large egg. I tend to make mine a little bit bigger just so we have some room in case there's ever any long-term issues. But that doesn't actually affect the weight loss, believe it or not. The size of the pouch is pretty irrelevant.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a couple other factors that do affect it. And we're now that we've kind of separated that, we have no way for it to come out. So we take a piece of intestine, the first one that reaches up there, so it has a way out. The native stomach is still there. You're still producing acid. You're still producing all the things that your body needs. It's just digesting about 2 feet further downstream. So you're still digesting everything. You have plenty of intestine left to digest everything. It just affects a certain few things that you can't absorb as well. But as long as those are supplemented, you do just fine.
You do just fine. So after the surgery, you've had this procedure, normal, I mean, it's like any other procedure. You're going to have a healing period. And then
Correct.
what is your life like after that?
Well, I mean, since it's laparoscopic, the amount of pain people have is actually not as bad as we think. A lot of patients have a hiatal hernia associated with this too, so I can repair the hiatal hernia at the same time. So now your heartburn's gone. I can't tell how many people tell me, it's like, hey doc, I don't care if I lose any weight, my heartburn's gone. You know, I'm like, that's great. But the thing is that there's a diet that you need to follow for afterwards to not to stress out the healing organ, so that eventually by about 5 to 6 weeks, close to 2 months, you're pretty much on regular food. But again, the important thing is the counseling ahead of time to make sure that you're getting the right food in, eating the right way. And what I tell everybody is this is not, you can't do it by yourself. Your whole family's going to go on this eating plan now. It's not a diet, it's an eating plan. This is how everybody's going to eat now.
Right.
Chances are they can probably stand to lose a few pounds themselves. Right? And so if you're the person that does the shopping, you're going to make these changes. And like I said, eating plans start at the grocery store, not when you're on the dinner table.
Okay. And again, if anybody's out there watching has questions about this, if you have questions about diet, obesity, about bariatric surgery, feel free to ask them live right here on Facebook, and we'll talk to Dr. Naik about them. I mean, you kind of hit on that, right? There is something to be said about, you know, your partner has to be kind of the support system.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're your enabler, right? Which is
absolutely,
which happens a lot of times.
And you ever watch My 600-Pound Life?
Have not.
Yeah, you should check that show out. It's really interesting.
Okay.
And the doctor who does that show has a fairly similar philosophy on certain of those things that I do. So I actually kind of enjoy watching that show. But invariably, you find that a lot of these patients who have reached that level of obesity have an enabler and really cannot function with them not being sick like that. And so I'm not saying everybody has an enabler in their life, but at the same time, I can't tell you how many times patients will tell me, like, look, I'm trying to buy healthy, and all of a sudden, you know, my significant other will bring ice cream home or whatever the case is, and you know, that's it. So as an extreme example, one time I told a patient, like, he keeps doing this, the next time he does it, just walk up to the fridge, grab it, just dump it in the trash right in front of him, see what happens.
Whoa.
Lesson learned.
That is like
a little extreme, but
extreme,
you know,
but I mean,
it's the point across.
Yeah, yeah, and so people, I mean, we want to let people know too, if you are interested in learning more, you guys do hold these seminars at Adventist Health Bakersfield, and we'll have those on our website. You go to Adventist Health Bakersfield, AdventistHealth.com, and you can find all the different schedules. It's ahbakersfield.org. I'm sorry, it's ahbakersfield.org, and it's the Wellness Center. We talk, you know, about you guys having kind of this connection because you want people to learn and really understand what they're doing before they have that.
It's not a cure. And that's one of the first things I tell everybody, this is not a cure. And it needs to be done in conjunction with lifestyle changes, with exercise, and really it takes a comprehensive program to be able to do that. And when you take all of those aspects, diet alone, as you can see, doesn't work well. Surgery alone, when you don't do any lifestyle changes, doesn't work well. So when you combine that along with education, with setting yourself up correctly, and good support system, then yeah, the success rates are going to be much higher. And we have a very active support group at Adventist Health, and they've been increasing their numbers monthly, and you know, I encourage everybody to go. Even if you've done well, you can be an inspiration to somebody who's going through the process, or if you're struggling, then you can find help from the people who have been successful. And again, there's study after study after study that shows that people who go to support group do much better than patients who don't have.
Because you're connected with other people who've kind of gone through the same situation you have. And there's a lot of, I'm sure, nuances of
Absolutely.
what you go through.
It's group learning.
It is
really.
Group learning, right? Again, AdventistHealth.org, AdventistHealth.org. You click on Services and Weight Management, and then go to the Weight Loss Surgery Program. And if you want more information, you can also call this phone number, 869-6580. Again, 869-6580. We've been answering a lot of questions here as we've been going along, not only about obesity and bariatric surgery, but also, of course, about the LINX procedure, which we were talking about just a short time ago, and that kind of pertains really to heartburn. I won't keep on saying heart disease, but it's heartburn. So, you know, and it's really interesting, and as time goes on, what do you think the next step is? You were talking about robotics. Is there something new that's going to be able to solve obesity in a much more efficient way down the road?
And the answer, I think, yes. There's a lot of things that are coming down the pike. Like I said, very exciting time to be in surgery.
You were talking about the genetics, right? The
yeah,
telomeres,
and so we're learning more about how the body handles excess calories, the genes that are involved in metabolism, the genes that are involved in hunger, and I think at some point we're going to be able to manipulate those genes to cut out the ones that tend to make us do this, or we can manipulate how those hormones interact so that basically very targeted, not having a wide range of side effects like we do with some of these medications, but having a more specific effect. And that's really where surgery, or not surgery, but medicine in general is going.
Yeah.
It's going for pinpoint therapy as opposed to just blasting something with that. I mean, back in the day when you had cancer, they just gave you radiation to your whole abdomen.
And chemotherapy,
spot,
which
right?
kills all
everything.
fast-moving cells.
So if you look at the new chemotherapies that are coming out, they are appointed specifically for this particular defect at this particular cancer, with minimal side effects to the other normal healthy cells. And I think we're going to be able to do that. And I think in the next 20 years, hopefully we'll never need to do that. I think if we can get better education out there to the general public and get rid of some of these mistruths that have been perpetuated for the last 30 years, I think we'll do a better job of eating. And I think if we do a better job of making better choices, we won't need it. That'd be the best situation.
Right.
And I tell everybody the best weight loss operation is the one you never need.
That's very good, wise advice. And again, we're going to tell you 869-6580. That is the number to the Wellness Center of Adventist Health Bakersfield. We can direct you over to Dr. Naik's way. He can answer your questions. You can go see him in person, too. Again, the bariatric surgery program at Adventist Health Bakersfield, plenty of accreditations. It's an accredited program nationally, and also is a blue distinction from the insurance program. Yeah, Blue Cross, and that kind of sets you apart because the work that you and the other surgeons do here in town at our facility, the work you do is of such a quality that it's been noted as a distinction, that the quality.
Well, it's nice to be recognized. We really track our results as well as we can, and we really have performance improvement measures. We look at things that we can work on, trying to decrease the length of stay, working on nausea. That's one of the big ones we're working on right right now, decreasing narcotic use after the surgery.
Crisis.
Yeah, and so that's something that's a big hot button topic right now, and we see it, and unfortunately it kind of puts me at a disadvantage because I cause pain for a living, and what am I supposed to do? Not give you pain medicine, right?
Right.
So it needs to be looked at, and we need to find more innovative ways of trying to keep people comfortable. Being done laparoscopically, that's less pain than when it was done open. Robotically is supposed to have a little less pain than the laparoscopic approach, just because of the way they're not torquing on the abdominal wall quite the same way. So we're making progress. It's an ongoing evolution, and I'm really excited to see what the next 20 years holds. Really,
it's exciting. Dr. Nirav Naik, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me
on the Wellness Connection. Good to see you, and thank you guys for joining us here on Facebook. We'll continue to answer your questions live if you have them for the next couple of minutes, and of course we'll answer them ongoing as you continue to post them on the video once it's posted. We appreciate you guys for joining us here on this Friday, and we'll see you next time.